Revelation chapter 12, from verse 1 to chapter 13, verse 10. Hear the word of the Lord. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now, war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short." And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured out from its mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and his authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast, and they worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who can fight against it?" And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world on the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with a sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. May the Lord add his blessings to the reading of his holy word. Well, I was in line to board a plane at the Tokyo airport in the early 90s, traveling by myself. A little bit taller than me, an elderly American man was immediately in front of me in the line with his wife, I assume his wife, and a grandson, probably about 10 or so. He turned to me and said, "Last time I was scheduled to come to Japan, the atomic bomb canceled my trip. Harry Truman saved my life." And he went on to explain how in 1945 he was in training in the army for the invasion of Japan. He expected to be killed. He was likely right. At the same ratio of Japanese soldiers to U.S. deaths, that was experienced in Okinawa, and Okinawa was the closest that U.S. forces came to fighting on Japanese home turf, at that same ratio, U.S. casualties for what was called Operation Downfall, that's the invasion of Japan, would have been 1 million, and about a quarter of whom would have been KIA, killed in action. That is about 250,000 dead Americans, a little more than the entire population of Greensboro. That is, there might be 250,000 U.S. graves in Japan today if the invasion had been launched. Now, some say, well, that would have never happened. Japan was on the verge of surrender, they say. All they needed was someone to just ask them kindly, but that is sheer fantasy. The imperialist Japanese saw surrender as shameful, and this was so ingrained into their culture, some Japanese soldiers kept hiding and even fighting for years after the war, with Second Lieutenant Hiro Onada continuing his guerrilla warfare in the Philippines until 1974, nearly 30 years after the end of the war. He would not surrender. The only way they got him to surrender was to bring his former commanding officer, used to be a major in the Japanese army, brought him to the Philippines and told him, your original orders are rescinded. You can go home now. Even after the atomic bombs and the Soviet Union's attack on the Japanese army in Manchuria, who were eyeing northern Japan, understand, U.S. has dropped 2 atomic bombs. The Soviet Union has attacked. Looks like they're going to maybe invade the northern half of Japan. The Japanese War Cabinet meets. There's 6 of them. They vote 3-3 on the question of surrender. Shall we surrender? They tied. They still couldn't agree to surrender. They believed that they could inflict so many casualties on the Americans that the USA would not put up with a war anymore. Their strategy was to inflict so many deaths on the U.S. that we would not put up with it, and we would negotiate, and so they could keep some of the territory that they had conquered, especially in China. Only when the emperor intervened and broke the tie would they surrender. In Japan, the emperor didn't just have the mandate of heaven, like in China, or a divine right of kings, like in Europe. He wasn't just endorsed by a god or gods. He was a god. So you had to put up with anything for him. Either national suicide, if they chose to continue to fight to the death, or even the shame of surrender. In the modern world, we think we can live and organize ourselves without God, with no reference to God, no more appealing to nature and nature's God, no rights endowed by our Creator, no mandate of heaven or divine rights. We can be like Napoleon, just crown ourselves an emperor, impose our own authority. And we think that is the way to freedom. But what happens, what we end up having to put up with is what Nietzsche called some Superman, not a comic book character. He means a tyrant, just someone who imposes his will on a nation just by, I say so. So we do away with God and we end up with beasts. We see that here in 5 parts. First, the birth. Second, the backstory. Third, the battle. Then the beast. And then finally, the blasphemy. We start all over in chapter 12. Remember, the 7th trumpet, like the 7th seal, brought us to the end. But now we approach the end in another way. In the way the story begins from the top. We recapitulate the story, this time beginning with a sign. A great sign appeared to heaven, he says, beginning of chapter 12. Signs, by definition, are not the thing they signify. They stand for it. They're in place of it. After the service, many of you will be going by a sign that says Virginia. Now, the sign itself is not Virginia. If someone says, look, there's Virginia, pointing to the sign, you go, no, that's just a sign. But you have to take it literally. No, a sign literally is not the thing. So what John sees, and what we just read, is an allegory. It's a symbolic representation of what has happened, or will happen, or is happening. Well, the first sign, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. So the sun, the moon, and 12 stars suggest the dream that Joseph had in the book of Genesis. If you're reading Revelation, I remember this similar sign before, all the way back in Genesis. That was the original family of Israel, with Joseph as the son, Joseph's mother, Rachel, the moon, and he and his brothers with the 12 stars. Since the woman, Israel, believes in Jesus, as we'll see, she is a sign for believing Israel. This is what this is a picture of, believing in Jesus, but they're Israelites, like John himself, right? In verse 2, she was pregnant, it was crying out in birth pangs and the agony of giving birth, right? Jesus came from faithful Israel. This pictures that the seed of the woman, promised all the way back in Genesis chapter 3, seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head. The seed of the woman comes from faithful Israel. And then there's a second sign in verse 3. Behold, it says, look at this, pay attention. This is a portent, okay, meaning a meaningful sign. A great red dragon. Great in that he is powerful, red in that he is murderous. In John chapter 8, verse 44, Jesus said the devil was a murderer from the beginning. A dragon symbolizes the fierce, relentless enemy of God. Now, there's no mystery about what this dragon symbolizes, because down in verse 9 tells us explicitly, says he's that ancient serpent, in other words, the one from the Garden of Eden, way back then, ancient, who was called the devil and Satan, okay, so we know exactly who it is. It has 7 heads, which means complete authority, 7 completion, heads, headship, authority, has 10 horns, 10 a fullness of a power. The horn of an animal is what it uses to gore, to focus and inflict its power. So the 10 horns showed that this dragon does that to the full. It has 7 diadems, which are jeweled crowns or like headbands, worn as a symbol of sovereignty. So it has authority, that's to rule. He's called the God of this age in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. So he is mighty. Verse 4 pictures him as sweeping down a third of the stars, like angels pictured the stars before, in chapter 9, I believe, bringing them to earth. That's bad for earth, isn't it? You think if the dragons, the angels that come to earth, that means we've got a lot of problems. That's where a lot of our problems come from. Anyway, the dragon is particularly intent on eliminating the one, the woman, faithful Israel, is about to give birth to. That's what his focus is. Right? He wants to destroy the one that the woman is bearing, who is Jesus. Wants to devour the child, the seed of the woman. And so here we see the spirit behind Herod's attempt to kill Jesus as a baby. Remember that story? Usually we often bring it up around Christmas time. Herod tried to wipe Jesus out. We didn't know which baby was Jesus, so kill them all. And so that's what happens with that. Massacring all the baby boys in Bethlehem. The dragon thought he could devour the male child with temptations. Live by bread alone. Live for money alone. Or seek his own glory and avoid the cross. But Jesus overcame the dragon. The male child, the seed of the woman, from Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, will crush the serpent's head and will rule, here says he will rule all the nations with a rod of iron, which is sort of funny to us because often we use the phrase rule with a rod of iron. He rules that class or whatever with a rod of iron. Kind of that's bad. We use it often critically. Like he's oppressive, he's tyrannical. Well, some people suspect all power is bad and having authority is always wrong. But here we see, well, that is not. The problem isn't that authority is bad. What's your basis of it? Where does it come from? Jesus rules strictly, and he's answering our centuries of prayers. Your kingdom come. What are we praying for when you pray that? Your kingdom come. We're praying, Lord, come and rule with a rod of iron. Impose your rule. And notice that he rules all nations, not just Israel, and not just the God of the so-called Christian nations, but all of them. But first, in verse 5, the son, the male child, he goes away. He was caught up to God and to his throne. That's why we call it the ascension, right? We know Jesus, after he raised from the dead, he ascended to God and his throne. That's where he is now. He's at God's throne. So the whole story of Jesus here is summarized very briefly from his birth to his ascension, as Jesus triumphing over the plot of the devil to devour him. So he triumphed over that. Eventually he will rule with a rod of iron, and the devil hates that because he wants to rule. Now the woman, in the meantime, in verse 6, it's faithful Israel, fled like Jesus had told them to. When you see the abomination of desolation, flee to the mountains. They flee to a place prepared by God to be safe. There they will be nourished for 1,260 days for this entire period. We talked about that last week. This entire period, this interlude between the 6th and 7th trumpets, or 6th and 7th seals. You take it either way. There's an interlude. 3.5 years, 1,260 days, 42 months. It's all a symbolic way of talking about this time right now, after Christ has ascended and before he returns, before the end. And during this time, the devil will be raging. He'll be trying to destroy the male child, try to destroy us. But God will protect his people, like this woman. Now, next comes the backstory, starting in verse 7. There's war in heaven. Now, when? When was there war in heaven? Sometime in the past. This is the backstory of where the dragon comes from. He was in heaven. The dragon, too, has angels, probably that 1/3 of angels he swept down by his tail. The dragon warred. Michael and his angels fought against him. But the dragon didn't have enough strength, and so he lost his place in heaven. He was thrown out. He's evicted. No longer in heaven. And we're reminded who he is. It's amazing that such a great being, such a powerful being, could be expelled from heaven. You could remove him. After all, he's the great dragon, that ancient serpent who tempted Adam and Eve in the garden, who is called in Greek literally diabolos, the devil, which means the accuser. That's what he does. He accuses. And often his accusations are true. Right? True accusations are more effective usually than false ones you just make up. So often what he says is true, but he's using it to condemn, to accuse. It's like a prosecutor in court. He stands before the judge, judges God, and he accuses God's people, accuses you. He's the Satan, it says, the adversary, one of your great enemies who has been deceiving the whole world to believe in one thing or another. If he can't get you to believe in materialism and atheism, that is, that the world this is all there is, the material things are all that matter, so might as well live for making money or live for pleasure. If he can't get you to believe that, then he'll try to deceive you to believing in superstition and idolatry. So you spend your life looking for magic rituals or trinkets or images that give you supernatural power. And he doesn't really care what you believe as long as you do not believe the truth, as long as you don't believe in Jesus. At the end of verse 9, he and his angels were thrown down to the earth. Now you might think, well, didn't another star, that sounds vaguely familiar. Did another star fall from heaven to earth? Oh yeah, remember Revelation chapter 9, verse 1? At the 5th trumpet, a star fell like it had been pushed. It fell from heaven to earth, where he, and then it calls the star a he. So this is not really a literal star. This is a person, a being. He opened the bottomless pit, releasing demonic forces that torture people. So that's one way of describing it. And then you get to chapter 12, describes it as using his tail to bring down 1/3 of these angels, demons, to earth. Back in chapter 9, he opened a bottomless pit, releasing demonic forces, and they make life miserable for people. They infiltrate. He said they're like locusts. What do locusts do? Locusts get over everything. They get into cupboards. Imagine waking up in the morning and there's locusts all over your bed. It'd be disgusting. It'd be horrible. But that's what they would do. There's a locust infestation. Now, the only good thing about locusts is they don't eat flesh, so they don't bite you. But these locusts here, they do. They don't eat the plants. They eat people. So they're horrible. They get over everything, and they torture people. Now, that's pictured in chapter 9, like that. Here in chapter 12, like 1/3 of the angels are stars. They've cast down to earth. Now, where do the ideas that we have in our culture that make people miserable, where do they come from? Like materialism, living for money. And then people live for money. They spend all their life chasing dollars, and they end up at the end of it, this is not very fulfilling. This doesn't make me happy. All this, even if they're successful. They're not happy with that. Hedonism, living for pleasure, whatever brief pleasure they can have. And then, of course, they have to have a lot of abortions, because that often ends up with even the result of all their living for pleasure. And that makes them miserable and depressed. Or racism, living for your race and hating others. You ever seen a happy racist? You ever seen like some white skinhead yelling the N-word and think, man, I want to know his secret of joy? No, never. They're miserable people. Racists are miserable. Or transgenderism. That's causing people to mutilate themselves. And often the suicide rate for them is very high because they're miserable, they're depressed. Or feminism, which causes women to think, well, I'm going to be just like a man, which also leads to their abortions. And then they wonder why they're so depressed. And they get into alcoholism because they're trying to drown their depression. Where do these depressing, miserable ideas come from? Well, they come from the pit, or from the 1/3 of the demons cast down to earth. That's where they come from. And this is here in chapter 12, the backstory. The dragon, Satan, warred in heaven, but was expelled. And he's coming down with his demonic angels. On the one hand, now heaven celebrates that in verse 10. Now the devil's been cast out, we're free of him. Now the salvation, that is the protection, the safety, and the power, and the kingdom, that's the mandate of heaven, the divine right of our God, and the authority of his Christ, they have come because the devil's gone. Satan's been cast out. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. Otherwise, that's what he's been constantly doing. He's been accusing God's people. And now he's gone. The prosecutor has been expelled from the heavenly courtroom. So no more is there anyone there to accuse you before God. This is picturing what Jesus did in his life and his death, his perfect obedience, his ministry. When he declared, I saw Satan fall like lightning from the sky, from heaven, and his death and resurrection. And he paid the price for our sins so that we could be seen as innocent before God, even though we're not really innocent. It's like the prosecutor in the case against you. You're on trial for your life. And the prosecutor suddenly is banished. God tells the bailiff, Michael, throw that prosecutor out. Get rid of him. Expel him from my courtroom. He was arguing that you are a sinner, and he was right. He's arguing that you deserve damnation, and he was right. But now he's been thrown out, and there's no more case against you. And no one is left to argue for your condemnation. So God bangs down the gavel, charges dismissed, and you are saved. Notice here in this allegory, the sign, Satan is the accuser, is thrown out of heaven. Now, when did this happen? Jesus told us in Luke chapter 10, verse 18, I saw, he's on earth, as he sent his disciples out, preach the kingdom. He says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. In other words, it happened already. It happened during his ministry on earth. It happened then. Jesus accomplished the expulsion of Satan from heaven during his incarnation. Now, do we think God let Satan back in? He's thrown out once, he fell down out once. I'm going to let him back in. No, of course not. This is the backstory here. This is illustrating the same thing that Jesus saw in an allegory here in Revelation 12. Heaven celebrates because now God's people are free of condemnation. No one accusing us anymore. And you conquer Satan in verse 11 by the blood of the Lamb. Here's that song we sang earlier. Conquered by the blood of the Lamb, overcome. That is, by the expulsion of Satan from heaven was made possible. It's not because what we did, some superstitious ritual we do that makes us overcome Satan. No, Jesus accomplished it by his blood, he's the Lamb, purchasing us with his blood, with his life. And then you conquer by the word of your testimony that the blood of the Lamb ransomed you shows when you give your testimony to that. It'll show when you're willing to confess him. He pays the price first, and that enables you to testify, Jesus is Lord. He's overcome. And you'll do that even if, like in John's day, it could cost you your life. They love not their lives, even unto death. Because you love not your physical life unto death. You love Jesus more. So they say here, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Satan's not there anymore because the accuser isn't there to condemn you. But he is here. So woe to you, woe to us, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath because he knows that his time is short. We have to put up with him. Some. What are you going to put up with? Well, we have to put up with him. Some. Even if it means loving not our lives unto death. What do you have to put up with? Third, the battle, starting in verse 13. When the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to earth, so after Jesus saw Satan falling down from heaven during his ministry. Then the dragon pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. So he's going to try to destroy faithful Israel, and really all believers, the entire church. But in verse 14, the woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness away from the serpent, so far away in a safe place. In this battle, God provides an airlift to rescue his people. Right? And we're picking up the story again from verse 6, where we were just told the woman fled into the wilderness. This is before the backstory. Now we're told Satan goes to battle against the woman and all the church. And now we're told that she was given wings and flew into the wilderness for a time and times and half a time. That's 3.5 years. It was the half week, that whole symbol for this entire interlude that we're in now. After the first 6 seals have been opened and the first 6 trumpets have been blown, the church is being persecuted. It's being pursued by the dragon, by Satan. But it's being kept before Christ returns. He is keeping it safe. He'll give you wings, fly away if necessary. The serpent, notice he called the serpent in verse 15. Changed, he was referring to the same being. He tries to kill her by sweeping her away with the flood. A disaster that it'll sweep many others away along with it, but he hopes to get to the church, to sweep it away, not caring about the others who might be drowned in the flood, as long as he gets to the woman, the faithful Israel, really the whole church. So all kinds of disasters. Think of the disasters throughout history that swept many people away, almost destroyed the church. The bubonic plague, the barbarians, World War II, all these kind of things. They kill many people, but Satan's real design is to destroy the church. And in verse 16, the earth, which I think here a symbol for believing Gentiles. Gentiles come from the earth, or the world. Believers from the world, from all kinds of nations, the other parts of the church, helps her escape by swallowing the river that the dragon had poured out. Again, God will do anything to protect his people. Give them wings, cause the earth to open up, swallow rivers, whatever it takes. God will protect his people. Well, then the dragon is upset. He's thwarted. He's frustrated. The dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring. He's going out to battle on the little brothers and sisters of the male child of Jesus, on the church. So if he can't kill Jesus or the woman who gave birth to him, he will go after his people, the body of Christ, us. Or he says, those who keep the commandments of God. His commandment is to believe in Jesus. Jesus said, this is God's works. This is the commandment. You believe in me. And to love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul. The dragon targets those who love God and who hold to the testimony of Jesus, who continue to confess that Jesus is Lord, even if it costs them everything. And Satan is just furious at us, for still our ancient foe does seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate. On earth is not his equal. We are doomed if God does not intervene for us, giving us wings, opening earth to swallow up floods. But he will, so we're not doomed. The dragon at the end of the chapter stood on the sand of the sea, as on the beach. He's thwarted, he's frustrated, he's furious, seeking to draw from the sea, the symbol of the unstable, raging world. He's trying to draw from it a force against the woman and her children, against the church, against us. So out of the stormy world come anything that hurts us: idolatry, Islam, Nazism, Marxism, materialism, always targeting us. And in this age, this interlude between what Christ has already accomplished and his return, we will have to put up with the fact that we are the targets of Satan's rage. He's battling against us, and we cannot overcome this enemy on our own. There's no way. Did we in our own strength confide, our striving would be losing. We're not the right man on our side, the man of God's own choosing. You ask who that may be? Well, Christ Jesus. It is he. Lord Sabaoth, Lord of hosts, host of armies of angels, his name, from age to age the same. And he must win the battle. Then comes forth the beast. John says, I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns, 10 to full horns. Again, the power, 7 heads, authority to completion, with 10 diadems on his horns and blasphemous names on his heads. Now, we were already introduced to the beast last week. He came with the 5th trumpet during the interlude, which is now. And then he arose at that time from the bottomless pit. That Satan, the dragon, opened up, that Satan and dragon opened up that bottomless pit, and out came from it the beast. First pictured in Daniel 7, remember that? Was the last of 4 empires. There were 4 empires represented by different animals. And the last one was portrayed as an indescribable monster with iron teeth, and it is fulfilled by the Roman Empire. Now here, it arises from the sea, the tumultuous mass of humanity, of nations and peoples, roiling in waves of movements and ideologies and new religions and empires and dynasties. Now, just like the beast in Daniel, 10 horns, that is a full complement of power to strike you with, and 7 heads, like the dragon. The dragon also had 7 heads with 10 diadems on its horns, which are crowns showing its authority. It is there to rule completely. Now here, in Revelation chapter 13, verse 2, the beast described was like a leopard, and this is new. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. Does animals sound familiar? They are the 3, I guess, animals in the vision in Daniel 7. This is a compilation. This beast is a combination of all the beasts from that vision in Daniel chapter 7. Each of the 4 empires that arose. So it is a crushing tyranny. It's the embodiment of totalitarianism, arbitrary government that doesn't believe there are any inalienable rights that restrict it, that doesn't need a mandate from heaven or a divine right, that power comes out of a barrel of a gun. And since it has the guns, it has the power. And it will do, it thinks, whatever it wants, including crushing the other children of the woman, the church. It has blasphemous names, accusing, slanderous names on his heads, like Domitian's also blasphemous in promoting itself. Remember the title of the Roman Emperor Domitian? Lord and God for himself. That was blasphemy. He's taking from God what belongs to God, taking it to myself. To this beast, the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. Their power is satanic. It's to conquer and destroy, especially, the focus is, remember, the church. That's what Satan is really after. If he has to sweep away other people in his quest to destroy the church, well, he'll do that. He doesn't care. But the church is the main target. In verse 3, a head had a mortal wound, just like the lamb back in chapter 5, had the marks of being slaughtered. So like that, the head was healed, represents a significant political or religious power that appeared to have been destroyed, mortally killed, but then miraculously recovers, illustrating Satan's deception. It's a counterfeit resurrection, an amazing comeback that earns the followers of many doubters. They say, I think he's gone, but no, he came back. In the late first century, many Romans believed that Nero, after having killed himself, that he would revive. There was a myth of Nero redivivus. Of course, he didn't. But the Roman Empire revived. When after Nero killed himself, there was a period of instability. I think like 4 emperors in a little more than a year, one after another. But they revived from that. They recovered, and the Roman Empire stayed dominant for centuries more. And so many people then will follow the beast. They believe in supporting whatever the Roman Empire did. The city of man. What it says is, I'm going to go along with it. That's the way to success. Many people worship power. They worship by doing whatever the one in power says. Just submit to whatever it says, whatever the government says. Acquiesce to the beast. Play along with the beast. Pledge allegiance to the beast. Flatter the beast. Respect symbols of the beast. Praise the beast. Emulate the beast. That is the way to success in the world. I've heard people sometimes talk about it. Well, they're the one in power. If you want to, you just have to go along. It doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. That's the way it is. So in verse 4, they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast? And who can fight against it? They have all the power. Go along with him. Who is like our Holy Father? Who is like our general? Who is like the Fuhrer? Who is like Stalin, the father of nations? And by doing that, whether they know it or not, they worship the dragon. For he, that's the dragon, had given his authority to the beast. And the beast gets his power, the kind of power that makes people willing to fight to the death for him, to continue fighting in the jungles of the Philippines for 30 years after the war. He gets that power from Satan. He's the dragon. If you worship the beast, you worship Satan. And that we cannot put up with. Finally, the blasphemy, starting in verse 5. The beast was given a mouth uttering haughty, literally in Greek, just great about himself words, and blasphemous words. The beast is a self-promoter, talks about how great he is, loves titles that elevate him, like Domitian's Lord and God, or the Incan kings calling themselves God King, or the popes taking the title Vicar, representative of Christ, or Japan's heavenly emperor. The beast, the tyrant, the self-appointed Lord and God, our God King, or even Vicar of Christ, heavenly emperor, or even a more modest chairman of the Central Committee, or president, but still as totalitarian. In the second half of verse 5, the beast is given, implicitly given. You think, well, beast is given by who? Well, given by God. God gives the beast. Remember the divine passive voice, but it means God is doing it. Here, God gives the beast the authority to act. Now, the beast doesn't know it. It thinks it owes its authority to itself, that it just grabbed the power itself. The power comes out of a barrel of a gun. It has the gun, so it has the power. He gives no recognition to any power. No heaven giving a mandate. No divinity giving a right, or a creator endowing us with rights that restrain his power. No, none of that. He thinks there's just my will. And with it, he imposes his will. And he thinks he's unrestrained by any authority over him. But God says, I gave you that authority. And he gives it for a short time, for 42 months, 3.5 years again. It's this interlude, that's where we are. And it uses the permission from God to rule people tyrannically, to oppress them, rule by arbitrarily, by its own will, its own whims. Whatever it thinks it says, it can make up laws and just impose them. And to slander God, in verse 6. Julian the Apostate, a 4th century emperor who renounced Christ, argued that Jesus was inferior to the mythological gods, the mythological traditional Roman gods. Because Jesus was born to a poor Jewish family. Julian the Apostate was a blasphemer. Joseph Smith claimed Jesus was just a man born as the brother of Lucifer who evolved to be a god. And you can too. Well, at least you men. Sorry, women, you're out. You can't, but well, that's too bad for you. Mormons, they may look nice sometimes and be nice and hospitable and friendly and smile, but they are blasphemers. The beast blasphemes his name, the name of Jesus, claiming that you can be saved by other names. And his dwelling, he blasphemes God's dwelling. Here it explains what that is. Those who dwell in heaven, that's where God dwells, among his people in heaven. So the beast bears false witness against the church triumphant, the church in heaven, blaming it for all kinds of crimes. It did all those horrible things. All those Christians of the past, they were all so horrible. They like slavery. It's all because of the church. No, it's not. That's been the fashion of the last century, so much so that even many Christians don't know any better. But the truth is that the church is responsible for everything good in our culture today. I don't say that lightly. I really believe that. The church is responsible for everything good in our culture today. The beast is also allowed by God. God allows it to make war on the saints and to conquer them. He appears triumphant over the church, but even that is only by God's allowance. Notice God allows it. He's on God's leash in verses 7 and 8. God gives it authority over every tribe and people and language and nation. So he appears successful. This beast is on a roll, and nothing succeeds like success. So if you want him to succeed, you go along with him. So all who dwell on the earth will worship it. They don't dare resist its power, except those whose names have been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. It says, everyone whose name has not been, notice the verb tense, has not been written in the book of life of the Lamb worships the beast, which means those whose names have been written in the book of life do not worship the beast. So the key difference is whether your name has been written in the book of life. Notice the order of events. Notice the verb tense. This is key. This is important. He doesn't say, well, if you resist the beast, if you just refuse to be a quisling, you refuse to play along, you're not going to go along with the totalitarian power, even if it means being killed, becoming a martyr, you only worship God, then if you do that, you will earn the right to have your name written in the book of life. No, he doesn't say that. First, their names have been written. It's past tense. It's a perfect tense. I mean, this has been done completely in the past. It's over with. In the past, got out his pen and wrote down your name in the book of life. It's from the foundation of the world. Just in case you didn't get the verb tense, he explains it precisely. From the foundation of the world. In other words, when God founded the universe, when in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. When he did that, he wrote the book of life. So he made a list of all who he would save. And we don't get our names on that list by resisting the beast. Our names are on that list first. And because they are, we don't worship the beast. We worship God alone. And just stop with that. Now think about it, because John does here. In verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. Remember that from all the letters to the churches? He hasn't done that since then, since chapter 3. Now we're hear it again. In other words, John says, stop. Pay attention to this. This is important. Hear what this means. What is it calling you to do? What's it mean for you? Is it a call for you to earn your way to heaven? You're going to be a rebel against the beast so you can get your name on that list? No, you can't. God wrote the list. It's written already from the foundation of the world. And think about that. It means that if God put your name in that book of life from the beginning, before you were born, before you had done anything good or bad, now if he put it there, then his will prevails. Not the beast, not the dragons. He put it there, and that makes the difference of why you don't worship the beast. And then he says, if someone is going to captivity by God's decree, in other words, it's God's plan for them to go to captivity, then they will go. In that last verse, who can resist his will if they are going to be killed? If that's God's decree, God has said that this person's going to be killed, then they will be killed. The beast's will, the dragon's will, the emperor's will, the god kings, the presidents or the chairman, or your will cannot change that. The dragon will be thwarted. The dragon will be frustrated. God will not. That means for you, saints, since God's will is to save you, he will. For you, you saints, this is a call. What's it mean for you? Well, John tells us, as plain as day, it's a call for you to endure. You may have to put up with some suffering, some beasts going after you, but endure it, put up with it, and believe. You're called to endurance and faith. Because you believe Jesus has overcome the dragon and you want him to come back soon and to rule with a rod of iron, rule you that way now because you love him more than your physical life. You put up with some things, some beast. Now, you endure, you believe. If you're a saint, you endure because you believe in a God who wrote your name before he created the world. So endure and believe.